Although rare in comparison to white slave owners, there were some free black individuals in the antebellum South who owned enslaved people. The motivations and circumstances surrounding black slave ownership were complex and varied, ranging from those who participated in the institution for economic gain to others who bought family members to protect them from the brutality of slavery. Here are some notable black slave owners in the South. 1. William Ellison, 1790–1861. Life before freedom. William Ellison was born into slavery in 1790 under the name April Ellison. His path to freedom was shaped by his apprenticeship under a white cotton gin maker. Ellison became skilled in the mechanical work of building and maintaining cotton gins, which were essential machines for separating cotton fibers from seeds, an important part of the cotton production process. Freedman and businessman, Ellison was freed in 1816 and quickly became a successful businessman in Sumter County, South Carolina. His expertise in cotton gin manufacturing was in high demand, as the invention of the cotton gin had dramatically increased the profitability of cotton farming in the South. With his earnings, Ellison purchased land and eventually began to acquire enslaved workers. Participation in the institution of slavery. While many freed black people sought to distance themselves from the institution of slavery, Ellison fully embraced it. He used his profits to buy more land and enslaved people, eventually becoming one of the largest black slave owners in the South. His operations resembled those of white planters, with the primary focus being cotton production. Ellison also practiced stringent control over his enslaved workers, reflecting the norms of white slaveholders at the time. Legacy. Ellison's story is often seen as one of economic success in an era where opportunities for freed black people were limited. However, his full participation in slavery complicates his legacy, as he contributed to the system of exploitation from which he had once been a victim. 2. Antoine Dubuclet, 1810–1887. A wealthy sugar planter, Antoine Dubuclet was born free into a wealthy Creole family in Louisiana, inheriting significant property and enslaved people from his father. He capitalized on Louisiana's booming sugar industry, owning extensive sugar plantations, which were among the most labor-intensive agricultural operations in the South. Slave ownership. By 1860, Dubuclet owned over 100 enslaved people, placing him among the wealthiest black men in Louisiana. Sugarcane cultivation was notorious for its harsh conditions, and the enslaved workers on Dubuclet's plantation faced grueling labor, much like those on white-owned plantations. Political influence. During Reconstruction, after the Civil War, Dubuclet's wealth was diminished, but he remained influential. He was elected as the Louisiana State Treasurer during Reconstruction and held the position from 1868 to 1878. His role in post-war politics marked him as one of the few black men to gain political power in the South during this time, reflecting the complicated intersection of race, class, and politics in the Reconstruction era. 3. Cyprian Rickard, Cedar Grove Plantation. Cyprian Rickard made history in 1851 when he purchased the Cedar Grove Plantation at an auction for $250,000, an extraordinary amount of money at the time. Located in Louisiana, this plantation became one of the largest owned by a black man in the antebellum South. Owning 91 enslaved people, with 91 enslaved workers under his control, Rickard was deeply embedded in the economic system of the South, which relied on slavery. Sugar was the primary crop on his plantation, and like other sugar planters, Rickard benefited from the labor of the people he enslaved. His position was rare, as black men who owned large-scale plantations were few and far between. A Creole elite, Rickard's family was part of the Creole class in Louisiana, a social group of mixed-race individuals who often had more economic mobility and access to education than other black people in the South. This Creole elite played a complex role in the history of the region, as some, like Rickard, embraced slavery as a path to wealth and social status. 4. Tommy LaFawn, 1810–1893. The philanthropic businessman. Tommy LaFawn was an influential figure in New Orleans, known for his success in business and philanthropy. Born into a free family of color, LaFawn made his fortune through various ventures, including real estate, retail, and banking. Complicated relationship with slavery. Although some sources suggest that Lafon may have owned enslaved people at certain points in his life, his involvement in slavery was minimal compared to other black slaveholders. He was a vocal advocate for civil rights and used his wealth to support charitable causes, particularly education for black children and aid for the poor in New Orleans. Post-slavery work. Lafon's philanthropy extended into the post-war period, where he continued to work for racial equality and justice. He donated large sums to institutions like hospitals, schools, and orphanages for black people, reflecting his commitment to improving the lives of African Americans after emancipation. Number 5. Justice Angel and Mistress L. Horry. Slave ownership in South Carolina. Justice Angel and Mistress L. Horry, two free black individuals in South Carolina, are notable for the large numbers of enslaved people they owned. According to the 1830 census, Angel owned 84 enslaved people, while Horry owned 77. This level of ownership was significant, even by the standards of white slaveholders. Economic and social position. Owning such a large number of enslaved people placed Angel and Horry in an elite class of black slaveholders. Their participation in the institution of slavery challenges traditional narratives of black resistance to slavery, as they operated within the system for economic gain. Economic motivations. Unlike some free black people who purchased enslaved family members to protect them from being sold, Angel and Horry were fully engaged in the economic structures of the South. Their wealth and social standing were tied directly to their ownership of enslaved laborers and their ability to profit from the labor-intensive agriculture of the region. Number 6. Marie Metoyer Coincoin and the Metoyer family. A family of landowners, Marie-Thérèse Coincoin, a former enslaved woman, gained her freedom in the late 18th century and went on to become a landowner in Louisiana. She and her descendants, the Metoyer family, founded the Isle Brevel community, a settlement of free black landowners. Slave ownership. The Metoyer family owned significant tracts of land and enslaved people, with some family members becoming wealthy planters. By the early 19th century, the Metoyers were integrated into the plantation economy, producing cash crops like cotton and tobacco. A complex legacy. While the Metoyers' rise to prominence is an extraordinary example of black success in the face of systemic racism, their participation in slavery complicates their legacy. The family's success was tied to the same institution that oppressed other black people, reflecting the broader contradictions of race, class, and slavery in the antebellum South. Number 7. Andrew Durnford, 1800 to 1859, sugar planter and businessman. Andrew Durnford was a free black sugar planter in Louisiana who became successful by owning one of the most productive sugar plantations in the state. Durnford was part of the Creole elite, a group of mixed-race individuals who had more social and economic opportunities than most black people in the South. Owning 77 enslaved people, by 1830, Durnford owned 77 enslaved individuals who worked on his sugar plantation. Sugar plantations required extensive labor, particularly during the harvest, and Durnford relied on enslaved labor to maintain his plantation's productivity. Friendship with John McDonough. Durnford had a close business relationship and friendship with John McDonough, a white planter and philanthropist. Their correspondence provides a rare glimpse into the complex relationship between black and white slaveholders and the economic transactions that connected them. Durnford's position in society, as both a slaveholder and a black man, placed him in a unique and often contradictory position in the South's racial hierarchy. Number 8. Charles Rue, large-scale slave ownership. Charles Rue was another prominent free black man in Louisiana who owned a significant number of enslaved people. His plantation, like others in the region, relied heavily on the labor of enslaved workers to produce cash crops such as cotton and sugar. Economic success. Rue's wealth, like that of other free black planters in Louisiana, came from his full participation in the slave-based agricultural economy. His ownership of dozens of enslaved people placed him among the wealthiest free black individuals in the South. Social position. Rue, like other free black planters, occupied a precarious social position. While he was a successful landowner and respected businessman, he remained subject to the systemic racism of Southern society. His ownership of enslaved people reflected the entanglement of race and class in the region. Motivations and complexities of black slave ownership. The reasons behind black slave ownership in the antebellum South were varied and nuanced. While some black slave owners purchased enslaved family members to secure their freedom, others participated in slavery for the same economic reasons as white slaveholders, to profit from the labor of enslaved people. In some cases, free black individuals sought to protect family members by purchasing them, but in other cases, they fully embraced the institution of slavery to build their wealth.